Getting back to 2024
Mm.
and Israel and Iran, we've not spoken about it yet. With the Iron Dome being breached. A couple of questions. Can you broadly explain how the Iron Dome worked and why it was breached? And can you kind of take us through the geopolitical scenario that's panning out as we speak?
Sure. Um, I'll start with just a quick brief on the situation. And if you don't mind, Ranveer, I'll provide a little bit of history
Sure.
of the conflict as well. I don't know if you've covered Israel and Palestine in detail before, but I think that the audience might benefit from getting some deeper historical context on how the world ended up where it has, insofar as that part of the world is concerned. So, really quickly, obviously, as I'm sure has been discussed on the show before, the Second World War was not only the Second World War, but it was also the Holocaust. Where in a final act of kind of industrialized genocide, the Nazi regime killed 6 million Jews in Europe. Now, the reason I'm calling it a final episode, Ranveer, is that if you look at, and I won't spend too much time on this, but if you look at the history of the Jewish people over the previous 1,000 years, it's been one long series of cataclysm after cataclysm. Repeated moments in history when they get completely displaced from their own homeland, and hundreds, if not thousands, of episodes, small and big, of effectively anti-Semitism and or Jew hatred exploding into wanton violence at various points throughout history. So the Holocaust was only like the final full stop in what is otherwise a very, very long sentence of Jew hate in the world. And all over Europe, all over the Middle East. India, by the way, very, very proudly, has never had a history of any form of hatred towards the Jews. And it's the one country where I think that I can say with confidence that a small number of Jews did emigrate to and found a free and hospitable life for themselves. We still have a synagogue in Bombay that operates in Kalagoda. So, the reason that's important, Ranveer, is that is the context for the formation of the Israeli state, where what happens at the end of the war is effectively the world wakes up to the reality that 6 million Jews have been murdered for being Jews in Europe. And so it is now inescapable that these people need their own homeland. Them living in these minority communities in other people's countries effectively, or in other countries, in other nations, among other communities, is just not working, right? I mean, we've seen that throughout history. Israel therefore gets formed through 20 years of inward immigration into what is today Israel and Palestine from 1921 till 1948. Throughout that period, 500,000 Jews, Ranveer, managed to move to Israel. And I just want to emphasize that number, that during the formation of Israel, only 500,000 Jews managed to move to Israel, but Hitler killed 6 million in Europe alone. So the scale of destruction versus what this fledgling Israeli state was weren't even comparable. In any event, since the formation of the State of Israel, it's become an extremely contentious issue because of the existing Palestinian population that was already there, that really felt in their immediate lived experience like someone's walked in out of nowhere and just created a new state where we used to be.
That geographical part of the world is called the Levant, right?
Yes, the broad term is the Levant. There have been various terms for it. It was called Judea historically. It was called Palestinia by the Romans. So yes.
So prior to World War II, how did people reference that part of the world?
Palestine.
Okay. That whole stretch that we know of as Israel.
Yes, the whole stretch that we know of as Israel today was referred to as Palestine, and there's a particular historical reason for that, Ranveer. The historical reason is the Latin name of the province that the Romans established there during the Roman Empire back in 1st century AD was Syria Palestinia. So even the modern word Syria comes from the Roman name for the province. So a lot of this simply has historical etymological roots. It didn't refer necessarily to a Palestinian people, to be clear. It referred only to a province whose name in Latin ended up becoming Syria Palestinia, which was the much larger province consisting of modern day Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Israel, all of it, together, the Romans considered that part in their empire to be a province called Syria-Palestina. Therefore, the British ended up calling it Palestine. Therefore, the British Mandate, which started at the end of World War I in 1921, where they were given responsibility for this region to take care of it on behalf of its people rather than as a colony, was called the British Mandate in Palestine and Transjordan. Why Transjordan? All of the territory east of the Jordan River, which is where the modern country of Jordan is. So the modern country of Jordan combined with the modern Israel/Palestine together made up the British Mandate of Palestine and Transjordan.
And it had a mix of Jews and Muslims?
Would you like to get into a little bit of the detailed
yeah.
history of this period? Okay, so then I'll slow down a little bit, and because I think again there's some detail and nuance here that's really important, because it unfortunately, Ranveer, this is one of those topics that you and I, we're not Jewish, we're not Palestinian, we're not Arab, we don't have a horse in the race. So maybe we can have a very reasonable conversation about this, but it tends to be a very emotive issue, a very hot button issue for most people. So really quickly, this starts in 1917 with the Balfour Declaration, where the British Empire basically made a statement that they were in support of the creation of a Jewish homeland in the historical Jewish homeland of the Jewish people. And if we start at 1100 BC, there is no doubt, Ranveer, that is the historical homeland of the Jewish people. Of that, there is no doubt. That's the only strip of land where the Jews have any connection to. There is no historical doubt that this is where they came from. There is no historical doubt that the reason they ended up being depopulated from that land is because they were forced to emigrate into various other parts of the world. So all of that history is very, very well known and very well established. Now, so much history has passed, though, that by the time you come to 1920s, you have a population of about 750,000 people in that whole strip. 22,000 square kilometers or so of land. So it's very, very lightly populated. It's not densely populated at all. Of those 750,000 people, Ranveer, there's about 75,000 Jews. This is before all this starts, right, in 1920s, just after World War I. About 75,000 Jews, about 75,000 Arab Christians, and about 600,000 Arab Muslims. So that's the demographic split. Vast majority Muslims, 75,000 Jews, largely living in Jerusalem and Nazareth and some of these historical biblical areas, and some Christians as well, again, because of the obvious connections in the Crusades and all of that this region has also had with Christianity. So, you then have a situation where between 1921 and 1948, when the British Mandate ends, and keep in mind, between 21 and 48, you have the interwar period. World War I's ended in 1918. 3 years later, the League of Nations is created and this mandate is given to the British. So they're basically running it like a colony. You have the interwar period, and then World War II happens from 39 to 45. And so even during World War II, the British are theoretically running this mandate. During this time, through the British Colonial Office, using passports and travel documents and selling all of their possessions in their home countries, Jews emigrate to this land because they're given this right to do so because of that decision by the British that Jews should be able to go back to their homeland. And they emigrate and they arrive, and those that can afford it buy land. Those that can't afford it go to an empty patch of land and set up a tent. Because you've left everything behind, taken a steamship or come overland, shown up at the British Colonial Office in the middle of this desert, just because it's your historical homeland and you've come back to try to build a life here, right? So that's how the Jews start to arrive. Now, over the same 20-25 year period, there's continued inward immigration even from the rest of the Arab populations around. So the population that was 750,000 in 1921 becomes about 1.2324 million in 1948. And the proportion of Jews has gone from 10% to about 23%. So it's still majority Arab, but there's been an influx of Jews. There's also been an influx of further Arabs. Christians are obviously starting to become a minority there. And the British then spend between 45 and 48 doing very similar things as they did in India, between India and Pakistan, trying to draw lines on a map and trying to get both sides to agree to some sort of partition plan for this territory. Now, in doing that, Ranveer, and this is a slightly controversial point, but I'm not here to be politically correct. If you remember, I mentioned to you that the British Mandate consisted of what is today Jordan plus what is today Israel. The British already split that and gave all of Jordan to just the Arabs. There is no distinction ethnically, by the way, between Jordanians and Palestinians. They're all just Arabs from that region. And the British then tried to further bifurcate just what is today Israel between the Arabs and the Jews. Various types of partition plans, and this won't be surprising at all to Indians that know our own history with the British. Various sorts of partition plans were discussed between both communities and the local British representatives. No plan was accepted ultimately because all plans were somehow unacceptable to both sides. One fine day, thanks to the bankruptcy of the British Empire, they just decide, boss, we're done. Mandate's over. We're handing back to the local communities and we're out. And no sooner had that last British ship left, the port, as 5 or 6 Arab nations commenced an invasion of that territory with only one sole purpose: refusal to accept the existence of even half a square inch of Jewish land on this territory. That's that first war in which Israel was born. Completely outnumbered. The only country that managed to help them a little bit at the beginning of the war, weirdly enough, in 1948 was Czechoslovakia. Completely random, but they did. And through nothing but grit and determination, somehow the Israelis managed to survive, Ranveer. And so when a lot of people ask about the birth of Israel, I'm quite clear because of the fact pattern in history that this is not a colonializing force. This is not a force that came and forced out an Arab depopulation. In fact, it was the Arab countries that first invaded Israel with a view to exterminating the Jews that had managed to emigrate there. And in winning that war, Israel managed to secure the territory of modern-day Israel that it has. Since then, Ranveer, in 1956, during the Suez Crisis, in 1967, in 1973, the Six-Day War and the Yom Kippur War, then in 2006 in Lebanon, in 2009 in Gaza, in 2014 in Gaza again, and now, 7th October 2023, it's been a near constant struggle for survival for the Israeli state. And so I think that context is really important for people as they understand what's going on in this current conflict, because I think the 7th of October was the last straw as far as the Israelis were concerned. And I think that the position that the Israelis have taken, especially with what we see has happened in the last couple of months now, is to say, we need this to be the last war. We won't accept another band-aid solution. Meaning we won't accept doing some damage to Hamas but leaving them alive, doing some damage to Hezbollah but leaving them alive, pushing Iran back but not fundamentally changing anything about the dynamic with Iran. Because I think they've concluded that the status quo, where Israel sort of operates in this slightly stress-filled peace with all of its neighbors around it, where at any point rocket attacks can come, and at any point a knife attack would happen in Tel Aviv, and at any point, another 7th of October happens. That's just not a situation that the Israelis are willing to live with anymore.
Hey, if you enjoyed today's clip, make sure you check out all the other clips we've uploaded on this channel. You'll find a clip related to almost every single topic as long as you're willing to search for it.